Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome you to the Digital Nordic FP&A Circle. My name is Olga Rudakova. I'm a FP&A professional, data storytelling trainer, and FP&A Trends Ambassador. I will be happy to facilitate this event for you tonight. The topic of tonight's event is From Traditional to Better and Beyond Budgeting. And this topic has attracted over 200 attendees from 48 different countries. So I'm very pleased to be so many people interested in the topic. Before we start, let me walk you through some previous events we had in the Nordic region. And I hope that today's event will make a good addition to this collection. What we can expect tonight. What is our agenda for the evening? We will speak about what the beyond budgeting is and why traditional budgeting is not working. We will be speaking about two practical cases tonight. One is from Nilfisk about weekly rolling forecast as risk mitigation enabler. And another one is from Roche about the learnings from moving to no budgets. Towards the end of the session, we will discuss technology aspect and see how technology can enable beyond budgeting. We'll certainly have conclusions and recommendations and Q&A session at the end. Now, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce our panelists for the evening. Please join me here on the webcam, and I will start introducing you one by one. Let me start with you, Knut. Fallen is a certified management consultant at Ekan Management. Knut is multiple author of books, economics books, and he's certified management consultant. He's active member of Beyond Budgeting community for over 10 years. Knut, we are happy to have you with us tonight.
Thank you.
Good to have you. And let me move on to you, Manuel. Manuel Espinosa Valenzuela is a head of performance analytics at Nilfisk. Manuel is a finance professional with experience that expands from banking, FMCG, consulting, and manufacturing. Manuel, we are happy that you could have joined us.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
The next speaker for the evening will be Amer Malik. He is CFO for United Arab Emirates at Roche. He's finance professional with over 20 years of experience. He's proficient in budgeting, planning, analysis, and many other areas. Amer, thank you for joining tonight.
Thank you, Olga. Happy to be here.
And the last speaker tonight will be Michael Langenfelder. Michael is a head of FP&A product management at Unit4. Michael is experienced head of FP&A product management and multiple speaker at FP&A trend events. Michael, thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me, Olga. Looking very much forward to our session today.
Oh, I'm looking as well. Thank you, guys. And let me briefly introduce FP&A group. You probably know that it's an international FP&A board presented in 27 cities, 16 countries, and 4 continents. But maybe you don't know about all the online educational resources, webinars, and workshops we are having. And another way to look at that is actually have a look at our research and surveys. So many aspects can be explored here. What we can expect tonight. Tonight we are expecting 90 minutes webinar. We expect the active audience participation in 4 polls, interactive Q&A session, and you can actually start sending your questions through question boxes right away. Networking is also possible. Make sure to add our speakers through your LinkedIn network. Presentation for this event is available in the handout section already now, but you will see the recording of the webinar and copy of the presentation very soon after the webinar. Please take part in our brief survey session at the end of the webinar, literally 30 seconds. Your feedback is very valuable to us. What's next? It's time for me to thank our technology partner. Unit4 is in business for people. It's a global leader in enterprise cloud software for people-centric organizations. Unit4, thank you for making this event possible. What can I say at the beginning of this presentation? Many of you are probably familiar with the term beyond budgeting, because this term has been around for over 2 decades. Beyond budgeting is a philosophy. Beyond budgeting is about abandoning traditional budgeting processes, adding more agility to your management organization. It's about freeing your finance professionals from routines, bureaucracy, rules, and regulations. I'm pretty sure that many of you have already encountered these 12 principles. And you will see that in our practical webinar tonight, we will be making constant references to them. We will speak about how important it is to make decisions based on our values, on what matters, not based on budget constraints or short-term financial targets. We'll certainly speak about how important it is to actually organize our management processes around our business life cycles, around the events that happen in our business, not just based on calendar year. We will see that core question of the evening will be how. How can we make this transition? But before we do that, let's start with why. Let's discuss why this transition is important and who can better tell us about this question why than Knut Fallen. Knut will be speaking about what beyond budgeting is and why traditional budgeting is not working. Knut, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Olga. My name is Knut Fallen, and I work at Ekan Management as a management consultant. And I've been doing that for approximately 20 years. Before that, I was at the university in Gothenburg, where I earned my PhD around 25 years ago. And lately, I've been writing 4 books about beyond budgeting, Swedish and in English, and also participated in a book about management control systems that I used at different universities. So my task here is to talk a little bit about beyond budgeting and why traditional budgeting isn't working. And of course, there are many reasons for that. And if you take next slide, please. So what I usually ask organization is about external circumstances or internal prerequisites. How are they working these days? Do you live in a SUSE or a VUCA world? Is it lots of disturbances and competitions that you have to adjust to be agile, dynamic, or do you have trouble recruiting people, working with agile and whatever you have in your organization? And of course, most organizations today, I think, experience that. And if you take next slide, please. It could be visualized by these 2 pictures, and you have the pandemic, of course, and I think most budgets 2020 were obsolete in March, April, and it could be for the better for some and for worse for more. Depends a little bit if you look at income or tech or costs. And the same thing with the internal perspective, where we actually hire very smart people. We are in the knowledge industry and not longer in the industrial age or agricultural age. So we have to trust people and attract and recruit smart people that can take their own decisions with a lot of autonomy. So that is one reason why traditional budgeting isn't working so well, because it's a very command and control oriented way of managing, and it isn't fit for the circumstances that you have in the environment today. So if you look at another reason, if you take next slide, please. Another reason is that the method that most organizations on the planet are using isn't really controlling cost, it's driving cost. And that can be visualized by this depiction that I found when I was working with an organization, and we tried to analyze the trends, and this pattern showed up where you can see in December you have 3 peaks, and I wondered, why do you have higher cost in December than the rest of the year if you looked at it at a certain way? And then the organization said, well, it's because we spend our money that we have in the budget, so we have lots of purchasing going on in December. So they actually also said that we are not doing what we should do in the first quarter or second quarter because we are so afraid of spending all the money. But then when we see that we have more left, then we spend it all. So that's why we have this sort of seasonal variation going on. And if we take next slide, please. So another reason why traditional budgeting isn't working is because lots of organizations today are working with modern operating models, you might say. So if you are working with discontinuous operations, you usually use Agile for projects. Or if you're working in manufacturing, you use continuous operations tools as Lean, and they all sort of have the same purpose, and you have a lot of customer focus, you have small batches, and you have to collaborate a lot. But the budget actually enforces silo structures and command and control structures in the company. So you have sort of a bureaucratic mainland while you try to create some agile islands in organizations. And the Beyond Budgeting framework actually works a lot better if you look at it as Agile and Lean as 2 apps. You can say that Beyond Budgeting is the operating system that will free up a lot of energy in the system. So if you take next slide, please. So, and Beyond Budgeting are those principles that Olga mentioned, and it's also some tools and things that you can do, and I've been following this network for over 10 years now, and nowadays what most organizations are doing is that they are questioning the benefits of a traditional budget, and mainly because the traditional budget is actually trying to serve 3 purposes: the target purpose and the forecast purpose and the allocation purpose in one process. And that means that they try to do something and to manage companies against one number when it actually should be 3. So most organizations try to separate those processes, and they work with strategy in different ways and the resource allocation processes in different ways. And what we think will happen will be forecasting, and that could be through machine learning or more mathematical methods to try to foresee what will happen using facts and that we have about the future and about the past. And those forecasts should be very realistic in a way. And the target process is more what we want to happen, and those things could be more ambitions, or it could be working with relative numbers in relation to others. So you have 3 processes that you are trying to do as best as you can, instead of one very bureaucratic process with lots of negotiations, and that's going on for too long, and it's delivering something that's usually obsolete January 1st, or at least a quarter in through a year. Next slide, please. And the effect then for the FP&A community is that, and of course managers and people in the organization, is that they have to move from this simple question, do I have a budget for this, to something that is more value creating, asking, is this the right thing to do? And not only once a year and doing this big bet in October, November or something like that, and it's then making small bets when needed. And then you have to build that on a lot of trust and transparency and visualization of numbers in different ways. So it's a little bit different, but you use accounting and so on, of course, and all the numbers you have in operations, but in some new ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Knut. Thank you for your presentation and for bringing in and actually ending with this marvelous transition, mindset transition from do I have a budget for this to is this the right thing to do? But it wasn't the only reference to beyond budgeting principles here in the presentation. Knut has touched quite important topic of separating budgets, like main target setting, forecasting, and resource allocation. So let me ask you, my dear participants, a question, polling question related to that. What do you currently use your budgets for? I'm very interested to see how do you use budgets now? How do you use budgets in your organizations? Is it setting targets? Is it allocating resources? Is it forecasting and planning? Or is it all of the above? I'm really curious to see where do we stand in our organizations. Are we using budgets to set targets, to allocate resources, to forecast and plan, or for all of the above? Most of you have voted. Let me close this poll and share the results with you. Oh, that's quite an interesting result. We actually see that most of the audience, 48%, have stated that budgets are currently being used for all of the above, for all of the reasons. Another 30% using it solely for setting targets. Another 20% use it for forecasting and planning. And the remaining 3% use it to allocate resources. Knut, what do you think? Is it something that you have expected as a result?
In a way, yes. I usually, when I lecture or when I do workshops with organizations, I usually have these kind of questions, but not all of the above is not my option. And then I get the answer, setting targets, allocating resources, and forecasting and planning. But it depends a little bit on when during a year I ask the question. So the budget is usually, it could be sort of a target in April or May for the next year, or it could be that you start in August, September, October doing forecasts. And then all of a sudden it's a decision about allocation in November, for example, or in January if you're late, or March even. But then that becomes a target for someone. So it depends a little bit who you ask and when you ask it. So, but I think it's a word that is so important that it shouldn't be used to so many things, and you should actually talk about the different purposes instead.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you for that. And having said that, let's actually all together discuss another related topic to that. So please, panelists, join me here on the webcam. And I would like to discuss with you, how can we practically set targets when planning is no longer attached to fiscal year? Quite a challenging thing. If we are not setting annual targets, how do we do that? And let me address with this challenging question first. You, Manuel, what do you think? How can we practically set targets?
I think it's a ambiguous question in some ways, but I think it's basically three things. strategy is very important. So there must be some sort of translation on how to reach and what means to reach your strategy goals. The second thing is run rates, how things are going so far, without looking that much at the budget position, if you have a budget position, because many companies still do budgets. And the third is bands or ranges of where you want to land, where it would be considered that the goal is achieved.
Right. Thank you for this answer. And let me move to you, Amar. How can we practically set targets if our planning is not attached to fiscal year?
Yeah, thank you very much. At Roche, we actually moved away from targets. So instead of having the targets, what we have is 90-day cycles in which we actually estimate and we roll it up as well. So the estimates are not considered as targets, but this is something, an indication which we can communicate internally and externally where we actually expect to land. I hope that answers your question.
Great, truly agile approach. So actually not planning, no targets are attached to financial year. Very nice answer. Michael, what do you think from technology standpoint? How can we practically set target if planning is no longer attached to fiscal year?
I would take a more opposing stance on this one. I would say we do still need them because there's a big group of stakeholders like banks, the owners, think of all the private equity owned organizations. They will want to know what the performance of a fiscal year, the final result will be. So at the end, I think it's not so much the exclusion of forecast, rolling forecast, budget versus one another. I think it's more we need to do all of them, and ideally with the support of software, because there's a lot there to help you.
Indeed, and that's actually in line with beyond budgeting principles, separating these two. Forecasting is one thing, target setting can still be attached to this calendar year. And back to you, Knut, what do you think? What's the best practice in this area, how we can set targets?
Well, I think first you have to let go of a lot of targets, because sometimes they're cascaded down in the organization, and you see organizations with like 50 or even 20 different targets for each individual or group. But what most organizations are doing is that they have they're working more with words and visions, of course, and you have that all. And then when it comes to targets, it's more about monitoring numbers, and especially relative numbers in relation to others, and then say that I will be better than myself, and try to improve all the time, and also improve against peers. So setting a specific number like 98 or so isn't that important. It's more important that you improve all the time, so you have a learning organization. So monitoring and analyzing numbers are more important. So, but it depends, of course, on the situation and your organization, what kind of tool you will use or method.
Right, and thank you for bringing in this concept of relative targets. We'll certainly come back to that through our webinar. Now it's time to discuss how can we actually make this transition from budgets to something else. And the first case study we will look at will be case study from Nilfisk, and Manuel will tell us about weekly rolling forecasts as risk mitigation enabler. Manuel, the stage is yours.
Thanks for having me again. I'm very glad to be here. I would like to introduce you to Nilfisk first. Nilfisk is a global leader of professional cleaning equipment. It is based in Denmark and has more than 100 years of history. We are almost 5,000 employees worldwide, and we trade in more than 100 countries with 10 manufacturing sites. Our value proposition is sitting in three pillars of like life cycle services with innovative solutions, and with clear commitment and actions to sustainability to control our carbon footprint. And basically, we believe in ways of working, in always improving ourselves, and having an even more executional culture with a clear operating system cross-functionally, where departments are digitally enabled and the people is empowered with a growth mindset. So I would say that that's why it's a really great place to be in. And then if we go to the next slide, we basically have 4 areas where we add value. One is our floor care division, where you can see like a lot of machines with different sizes that you might see in airports, hospitals, warehouses, etc. Industrial vacuum cleaners, where it is used in the agriculture or automotive industries, and high pressure washers. And we also have some part of the portfolio that is targeted to consumers like you and I. And we also have a pretty strong aftermarket positioning with more than 800 technicians and 300 engineers worldwide, where they are always supporting our customers. If we jump to the next slide, please. I wanted to structure this framework that I've used in some of fast-moving consumer goods companies, and we are in the journey of implementing this in Nilfisk as well. Basically, what the outcome of this is weekly positioning and weekly updated positioning of your full P&L, cash flow position, and balance sheet by changing your baseline to your latest estimate. Basically, in this framework, is the first step is really taking the time to discover how the company or the organization creates value, what is the strategy behind, how that escalates down to the different business units, and also discover what is your Pareto, what is the Pareto in the organization, what are the key drivers of profit and also growth. And also, I think it's very important to translate the understanding of the business model to key operational metrics and to see how that it is translated to the financials in the end. The second part of this framework is to scope the drivers. What are the events that trigger the changes in your performance? There are always internal and external events. External events, we all know the last 2 years, how they've been with the natural disaster, pandemics. Without going too far, a few weeks ago, there was a tornado in the US that partly destroyed one of our distribution centers. So that, of course, changes dramatically the positioning of your financials for the rest of the year. So knowing what is internal and external and creating the environment in order to be able to analyze how these things can make your business change in a certain direction. For example, if you are part of any industry that they might have to recall products, like for example food companies, if there is some sort of non-compliant ingredient that you discover after a while and then you have to recall a lot of products, then that might be quite dramatic for the organization in terms of reputations, but also on cost tracking to trigger insurances and so on. Then the next part is if you are in a position that is luxurious and and you have softwares and analytic tools that can help you understand how things move, like from a volume perspective, for example, or price, or a value proposition perspective. And if you don't have problems on data integration and you have predictive forecasting, then you are probably in the best in class. If you don't, then make the necessary steps in order to get there, to have bottom-up prescriptive analytics. Essentially means that you will be able to quickly deep dive if, for example, a product is or a line of products is having a failure or out of stock situations, etc. Then you will be able to see how that will affect your organic growth in the upcoming 90 days or 180 days, based on what has been planned in your demands review in the other departments of your company. Then the third and central part is to give the right time to analyze and set up sensitivity analysis. This is pretty much linked to how to use the prescriptive analytics and predictive forecasting. And also it is very, very important to involve the business units to be transparent on how you are measuring things. People can only contribute positively when you are transparent, and the feedback is always making you improve what you have set for them in terms of automatic analytics. The fourth part of this framework is building your statements. When you have built this outcome of going from one period or one forecasting positioning to the other, then based it in some comments as well on the key metrics that you have unfolded. And what I always try to build is risk likelihood versus impact matrix. This helps you to also manage your sensitivity analytics in a way that how this matrix will look like, how likely or certain is an event to happen, if it's rare to very likely, or versus the impact that it will have if it's severe or totally non-dramatic. That is also a tool that helps to quantify events and to follow up on them. Then the last part of this framework is always involving the business, building trust and formalizing the communication flow. It will only promote controllership culture done right, and if you like, business partnering attributes that every organization can benefit from. And with that, I finish my presentation.
Great. Thank you, Manuel, for bringing in and for describing the framework you use at Nilfisk to create your weekly rolling forecast. And I think what we clearly see here that forecasts certainly need frequent updates. Let me ask my audience a question related to that. The question is, when does your budget become obsolete? You see that budgets lately become obsolete very quickly, but I want to see what is true for your organization. When does your budget become obsolete? January 1st, right after the first quarter, after 6 months, or usually it's valid for the whole year. I'm really wondering what will be the statistics tonight. When does your budget become obsolete? January 1st, right after the first quarter, after 6 months, or it is valid for the whole year. Most of the audience has voted. So let me close the poll. and let me share the results with you. What do we see? It's actually most of you, 41%, have answered that budget becomes obsolete after the first quarter. Another 32% say that actually holds for the whole year. Quite amazing result. 15% say that January 1st and 12% say that at least for 6 months it is valid. Manuel, what do you think? Does this result surprise you, or it's in line with your expectations?
I think it's actually in line with my expectations, but maybe actually the 32% of valid for the whole year is a bit surprising. I thought that one would be lower. It seems like a lot of organizations are using budget as a controllership tool, basically.
Right, or coming from very stable businesses, very stable industries. Indeed, that's quite surprising result. That's for quite a long time budget is still valid. Let's discuss all together a question related to that with all of you, with all the panelists. So indeed, it is challenging to have budget relevant for the whole year, but how can we make our plans and forecasts relevant for the whole year and even beyond? What do you think? I will start with you, Amer. What's your solution to this?
Hi. I think at Roche, what we have is which is called the event-driven planning. So we actually have a certain threshold. So as soon as we reach that threshold, we have a tool in which we actually report it, and then it becomes pretty much relevant straight away as well. So event-driven planning, and I think it is pretty much in line with what Manuel was stating earlier as well.
Good, and certainly strategy. Do not reforecast everything, but reforecast often enough based on the events that happen around. Michael, what's your solution to that? How can we make our plans relevant for the whole year?
I think for me, the key answer here would be to link them to the strategy. If you start the process from the strategy and vision and then break it down into planning, budgeting, and forecasting, it can never become outdated because, well, maybe there might be a very rare case that you need to change your vision completely and mission for the organization. But if you start from this should be valid over a longer time frame and much longer than the current year.
That's an interesting aspect, truly integrating strategy and planning. Thank you for this view. And let me move on to you, Knut. What do you think? How we can make sure that our plans and forecasts are valid for the whole year?
It depends, of course, a little bit on the organization, but what many organizations are doing wrong is that they are doing budgets and plans that are too detailed and cascaded down in the organization, or even if you have a bottom-up planning process, and also that you have a forecast that is until December 31st. So I think work more with rolling monitoring of actual numbers to pick up early warning signals. That's really important. And then when you plan for a yearly basis, I mean, you need a plan for a year or even longer, but do it approximately right instead of exactly wrong. So you have to take decisions in a shorter perspective, like in the agile world, or even when you work with lean, so you have more of a pull perspective on it. But I agree with Michael. Of course, you need a vision and I mean the long-term agenda, so yeah, that would be it.
Thank you. And Manuel, what's your input for that? How can we make sure that our plans and forecasts are valid for the whole year?
I think it's by using technology. That would be a very good enabler. For example, in what the manufacturing industry will really benefit from, and many companies are doing this, is to have the business planning or integrated business planning to the financials. If you have some sort of one-pager decision tree explaining how an automatic process is working. You can just go and update every day, and how that translates to what the position for the rest of the year would be, and then how that translates to your profit, and then the organization is suddenly agile to manage mix for growth. That's more like in the manufacturing, distribution, and selling of products. But in the case of, for example, research and development, then I think it will be a complete different story, probably more project-based, and see how they are doing, if they are on track or not.
Good. Certainly, technology and automation can help you update your forecast very quickly with less effort. And certainly, it can be a way to solve the problem. Thank you for all of your inputs to the discussion, and we will move on to our third presentation for the evening. Another case study on how can we make this transition. And this time it will be case study from Roche, presented by Amer Malik. We will be speaking about the learnings from moving to no budgets. Amer, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Olga. Hello, everyone, and I hope all of you are in good health. Today, I'll be talking about Roche's transformation journey so far, which started a few years ago. But first, a few words about Roche. Roche is one of the largest life sciences organizations in the world, established around 126 years ago, and has over 100,000 employees worldwide. It has always been ranked as one of the most sustainable companies on Dow Jones Sustainability Index. On the next slide, I will talk about what drives us at Roche. Doing now what patients need next is our purpose. Better outcomes for more patients faster is our guiding star. And our ambition is 3 to 5 times more benefits to patients at half the cost to the society. Our finance strategy is very much in sync with our purpose, with our North Star, and with our ambition, and what drives us as well at Roche. On the next slide, I will share a few learnings from our transformation journey and what role finance played in it, especially moving from traditional budgeting process to no budgets. Why did we actually change the process? For decades, Roche was mainly focused on oncology. From year 2000 to 2010, Roche launched approximately 5 to 6 major products. And for the next 10 years, from 2011 to 2020, more than 17 major medicines and diagnostic tests were actually launched, and many in completely new disease areas and moving towards personalized healthcare. And the question was, how do you manage this complex portfolio without overblowing your resource base? Roche was not the only company trying to realize the personalized healthcare, but many others as well. So the complexity for the healthcare ecosystem increased as a whole. And here, how do you actually partner with the external environment to address this complexity and moreover, the cost burden which the system started to feel as well? Our vision, our purpose, and our North Star state very clearly that we must spend more time with our customers solving for our patients instead of spending time over and over again in internal planning process. So the case for change was very clear. How many of you feel, I think this was one of the survey questions as well, that by the time you're done with your planning cycle, most of your assumptions have already changed. By first quarter, your plan is already outdated. So after the budgets are typically set, there are two outcomes what we'll have. There is a team who are overspending, and what they're asking for is more money. And there are teams who are underspending, and they're holding on to their budget, and they're saying, no, we will need it for later on for the year. So here the result is that you have on one hand allocated resources, which is reserved for one team, and they're not utilizing those resources, they're reserving it just for the second half of the year. And on the other hand, there is a clear business need where we should be spending money, which is not being fulfilled. So how did we make it a reality? How did we get started? Well, it was very clear that the process was broken, and we already had guidelines from our global colleagues that we need to simplify significantly. So the Swedish finance team went to the business and asked a very simple question. should we actually get rid of the very rigid and heavy planning and budgeting process? And almost everybody was on board. However, there were three major concerns which I would like to share over here from the colleagues. The first one was, will I have to go for approval every time I need money? And our answer was no. Instead of asking, do I have the budget for this one, ask, does it actually help me get to the desired outcome? So the focus moved from the budget to the outcome. The second concern was, is it a cost saving exercise? So there was a little bit, do we really trust the new process or not? And our answer was no, it is not a cost saving exercise. The third concern was, will we end up overspending? So, and our answer from finance was, this might happen, but we must try and see where we actually end up. So we must test the idea. We ensured the clear commitment from the leadership team and that no shadow processes will crawl back. And you know the definition of shadow processes, different name, but the same process. But we ensured that this would not happen. And this is how we try to build the trust with the rest of the team. Here, I would like to share my experience with two different cultures, Sweden and UAE. My transformation journey started in Sweden, and then I actually moved to UAE. In Sweden, we kicked off once we agreed that, yes, we need to go ahead with the process, and we very quickly rolled it out. On the other hand, in UAE, the leadership team actually decided to take a stepwise approach. It took me a little longer to convince the leadership team that, yes, this is a good idea, that we should go ahead with this one. So what I mean by stepwise approach, we decided in UAE to go with the first department first. Let's have a look at it for 3 months, then move to the second department. It took us almost 9 months to actually roll it out completely as well. And here, the idea is that, yes, we have to be mindful about the cultural differences and where the organization is in your global network, and where the mindset of the people, wherever you're trying to implement this kind of initiative is. So how did we actually connected different dots? So it is not a standalone process. So what we had to do was we had to create new tools, we had to create new routines, new interaction points between us and business to understand the value drivers rather than just understanding the cost drivers. Roche globally moved to, as I mentioned earlier, event-driven planning. So the FP&A team can now update their forecast as many times as they want, and it is instantly reflected in our global aggregated estimate, and we know that where we actually expect to land for the year as well. Roche also removed all the sales targets. So first we removed the budgets, and the second one, what we did was we also removed the sales targets. We no longer have the sales force. What we have instead, what we replaced the sales force with the roles which are called patient journey partners. As I mentioned earlier on, our purpose, our vision was pretty much focused on the patient. So we created the roles that are primarily focusing on the patient journeys. What we did was we established 90-day cycles for retrospectives and feedback loops, as Knut was mentioning earlier on as well, that it is extremely important to pick up early signals, which direction which we are heading, in order to continuously correcting the course as well. Outcomes, what we've achieved so far. So we saved, instead of the first concern was that, yes, we might overspend the money, we saved more than 10% of our variable cost, and we continue saving that as well, because you did not have to hold on to your budget, you did not have to spend it in order to secure the budget for the next year. The feedback from the business was very positive. They said that, yes, now they can dedicate more time to creating value for the patients in the system instead of spending countless hours on building forecast and efforts in order to protect their budget as well. And typically it was taking us roughly around 3 to 4 months, every year, just to create the plan and the budgets as well. They also see the finance playing even more central role as a business partner instead of controllers for the budgets as well. In Sweden, the organization actually rated it as one of the most innovative ideas from the finance, and then the feedback was very positive. So what happened was, this initiative also helped Roche to move towards the next phase of transformation, that is to become a network organization, enabling fluidity of resources. So first, we actually worked on the variable cost, and then, as you know, the biggest resource any organization has is people. So once you actually enable people to become a little bit more fluid and start contributing towards your organizational network, then you actually create the fluidity. And then you leverage those resources, not only sitting in one country, but Roche actually expects everyone within Roche to dedicate approximately 20% of their time to the Roche network. So our journey continues on. This is a continuous learning cycle, as I mentioned earlier on, and then we are correcting our course as we go. I hope some of these learnings will help some of you who are thinking about getting started on the similar path. Thank you.
Thank you, Amar, for sharing your journey. And I'm pretty sure that these learnings will help many of us. You've walked quite far already. My dear participants, don't hesitate to ask our panelists questions. We are already receiving many of these questions, but you still have time to ask more. Use questions box for that. And meanwhile, let me ask you a polling question. I really want to look inside your organizations and find out, are you using any of these beyond budgeting methods in practice? So are you using dynamic resource allocation, or maybe you're using rolling monitoring of actual trends, or you're using setting relative targets? Many of these Knut has mentioned in his presentation or in his answers. So even if you've not met that, you certainly know what it is. Dynamic resource allocation, rolling monitoring of actual trend, or setting relative targets, or maybe using all of these at once. Let's see, where do we stand in terms of advanced beyond budgeting methods in practice? Most of you have voted. So let me close this poll and share the results with you. What do we see? We see that 56% of you, quite a high number, are using rolling monitoring of actual trends, this spotting of early signals, taking out as much as possible from actual data to see where we're moving. Another 26% stated that all of the above is being used, very advanced state. Another 11% had mentioned relative targets, and 7% have mentioned dynamic resource allocation. Amar, what do you think? Are these results surprising for you or not?
No, actually, it's pretty much in line with what I was expecting. Rolling monitoring of actual trends is pretty much what typically the management is interested in as well. I am a little bit like all of above. If a lot of organizations are using dynamic resource allocation, I think this is a very good trend. And if I combine that 26% and 7% above as well, I think that's a very encouraging trend, especially for the finance community in the way we are actually heading.
Yeah, I see these numbers very positively as well. And let's all join for a short discussion again. See that for some organizations, using these principles might be still a challenge. So what advice we can give them? How can we practically start with beyond budgeting? What should be the first step? And let me start with you, Michael. What do you think? How can we practically start?
I would pick 2 points. One is not new. It's again my vision mission statement. So start always from there. You will never go wrong if you choose that as your starting and reference point. And the second one would be, but that's not special about beyond budgeting in general, especially for using software to support you. Check your P&L. What's the most important area for you? Usually it's oftentimes revenues. It might be HR costs for people-centric organizations. It might be depreciations for asset-intense industries. And then on those areas, focus first. Improve those areas where a lot of users are involved. You will generate the most benefit there.
Good, very good advice. Thank you for that. Knut, what do you think? How can we practically start with beyond budgeting?
Well, I think to assess, as Emma said, to assess the processes you have today, are they creating any value, or are they just bureaucratic, cost-driving processes that are obsolete in the first quarter of the year or something like that? So that is at least one thing you can ask yourself, and then look around a little bit and see what are other companies doing, because it's not a recipe, but there are lots of different ingredients that you have to use for different companies, and if you work with R&D, for example, as Eimer was doing or is doing, or marketing rather, in an R&D company, you have to use the tools a little bit different compared to manufacturing or retail. So yeah,
Right.
there are lots of
Right.
examples.
Look at your industry best practice and start from there. Quite a good piece of advice. Manuel, what do you think? How can we start with beyond budgeting?
I think I will again come back to what actually is the business model, how value is created, and how that lands in the general ledgers that then are consolidated. Is there any standardization? What is the level of the standardization? Is there any financial policy that is actually a roadblock for the organization to create value and enable again with the digitalization and technologies in order to make the job easier for people, so then they can dedicate more time for the things that really add value for the organization.
Right, right. And back to you, Amar. How would you start with beyond budgeting?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And as I shared, I mean, what we started was just asking the question, I mean, what we have is really working for us, and it is really creating value for us or not. And then if you do away with that one, what good looks like. So having a very clear conversation, within your organization and where we are and where we should be, and just mapping, I mean, how do we actually get there? So I think having a clear realization, because so many times we can fall in love with the processes what we have. So that is one of the things what we have is we need to be very honest with ourselves as well, what we have. I mean, how is it actually serving us? It is really serving what Michael was saying as well. I mean, our purpose, and I mean, what are we trying to achieve? So it shouldn't be an end, it should be a means to an end, and end has to be very different as well. I mean, it should be linked with the purpose, what we're trying to do. So this is something which I would propose, I mean, how to get started on this one.
Very nice. Setting clear expectations and using beyond budgeting philosophy as means to an end. Thank you for all your amazing answers. And let's move on to our last presentation for the evening. What can help this transition? What can enable this difficult transition towards beyond budgeting? Michael will tell us about that. He will speak about how technology can enable beyond budgeting. Michael, the stage is yours.
Thanks a lot, Olga. Well, I wanted to talk about in the beyond budgeting setup and what FP&A software of today can do for you, about mainly 4 points. First, we'll start with the target setting and talk quickly about strategic FP&A and what in this area software can do for you. Then we'll go into more details, and I want to share with you a lot of practical examples of what the software can do for you in the area of resource allocation. We need to talk, of course, also about the rolling forecast. And last but not least, we will pull it all together and discuss what the final output, the reporting with FP&A software should be. So let's get started on the journey. And as you've heard from my comments before, it has to be with the strategic FP&A. So I think this is the true starting point in the system. You define vision, mission, and the values, you set them up. Then the next step is you break those down into first objectives, and then you will later want to monitor those objectives you've set with reporting and analytics, how actuals develop. So if we proceed, this example just shows as an example how you would then set up your objectives. A key component about the objective setup is that you define the KPIs with high level goals over the next years that you want to achieve. It's very important also to have in the system set up a clear definition of what the KPIs are and how you want to calculate them. The next step is then, again, as a sample, visualization. Once you get then into the reporting, you need clear reports that immediately show you, well, how are we doing on achieving those high level numbers? And the last comment here that I want to make is that we see a lot already the United Nations sustainability goals. So organizations are checking what they are and how they will influence back to their objectives for the organization, the goals that the company tries to achieve. If we move to the second main topic that we wanted to discuss here, how software can support you and beyond budgeting, it's about the fully integrated financial planning. And when I say fully, I refer to the three components that you see on this visualization, which is P&L, balance sheet, and cash flow. So it should not just be about the P&L. You should have, for your forecasting and budgeting, have fully integrated your sub-plans, and as mentioned before, focus on the areas that matter most for you, be it sales, HR planning, or investments. In those sub-plans, we usually see value drivers as one of the key logic components, how you generate those forecast values. But we see as a second trend also that those numbers are generated via AI. Those two options should not exclude one another, but maybe work in conjunction. The next step is a key point then, because if you think about this little house of planning visualization, where in your focus areas, be it cost planning, revenue planning, HR, investment planning, a lot of users are working on modern FP&A software at the same time on those topics. So what you as an FP&A department definitely need, and modern FP&A software can do this for you, is to stay in control and have the overview of where you are, who has entered data in the system, what's the status. And this should be easy in the system to have this overview and control. The third really important point that I wanted to stress here, when we think about beyond budgeting, and many of the other presenters have mentioned the topic already, it's the fast simulation that you need. So you don't want those long processes to update your data. There could be a guided process for your main areas in the system where you want to change data. And some of the examples you see here on this screenshot. The important point then is that you always have the fully integrated system again, that those changes will lead immediately to an effect in the P&L, in the balance sheet, and also in the cash flow, again, with easy to consume reports. The next step, step 3 on the agenda, is to talk about the rolling or the constant forecasting. I have two examples from real life with you. The first one just gives an overview for a year-end forecast. The year-end forecast is, in this example, open, of course, just for the remaining months of the year. The key topic about this rolling forecasting, and generally about the forecasting that I often make, is it should be a constant forecasting. The system, with the system support, this is possible. It should be available for data entries at all time. And you as the FP&A department basically just decide when the cutoff line is, when you say, okay, we need to report the numbers. But whenever anybody in the organization has a new perspective on the future, this data can be added in the system and enrich the overall picture. The second example that I've brought with me is just an overview for a rolling forecast, where you look further into the future and not be limited with a year-end date. Well, and coming to the last area, this is then really the Champions League, because now we need to pull everything together. We have the actuals in our system, we have the forecast and the budget numbers, and now we want to start reporting those numbers. A key component in FP&A software of today is that it's not just about visualizing the numbers, but they're great tools to collect also the commenting, so the assessment of users in the system. And this could be explaining why did we over or underachieve our goals, be it from forecast or budget. And of course, you could also keep track of what the necessary actions are once you have described, well, we have an issue in this area, we did not achieve what we wanted to achieve, either in budget or forecast. what are your next action items that you need to take care of. And the very last step, ideally, would then be that analyzing and reading this information in your FP&A system really becomes more like reading a newspaper. So I have brought an example here where you see you would have all in your cloud modern platform, where you then go in, you have a look at your management summary in this example. If we proceed to the next one, where you get your high level summary with comments, with reports, easy to consume even for executives. And if they want to zoom into details for a certain business unit, for a certain product, well, there's of course more detail to be shown here. But it feels from a user experience more like reading a newspaper than working hard with numbers in a FP&A system. And with that, back to you, Olga.
Thank you, Michael. I'm looking forward to the future of FP&A when we will be reading newspapers rather than constantly budgeting and planning. Thank you for that presentation. And my dear participants, it's still time. You still have time to ask questions to our panelists, so you can do so. And meanwhile, let's answer the question, the last polling question for tonight. Let's see how good are your current systems to support beyond budgeting. What I really want to know is which of the following requirements for beyond budgeting your current solution needs. It enables collaboration across departments. It enables rolling forecasts or event-driven forecasts. It enables simulations and scenarios, and all of the above. So collaboration between departments, rolling forecasts or event-driven forecasts, simulations and scenarios, all of the above. I'm really wondering where we stand in terms of systems, in terms of technology. Most of you have voted, so let me close this poll and actually share the results with you. So what do we see here? We see that 36% stated that all of the above, so you already have quite advanced systems at your disposal. 32% mentioned that rolling forecasts are enabled by their systems. 23% have stated that their software enables collaboration across departments, and remaining 9% have mentioned simulations and scenarios. Michael, what do you think? Is it something that you have expected?
To be honest, I think the results are better than I would have expected, but there's still a lot of room for improvement there. Definitely the 34% who are doing all of those, that's a very good status that a third of the participants have reached. And it should be more, to be honest, because there is the software, the support there. And I think we should see this number grow in the future. But I have seen other polls that showed worse results than this one.
Right. Actually, 23% of participants have stated that their software enables collaboration across departments. That's not too high number. So let's discuss a bit all together. How has collaboration practically changed in your organization after moving away from budgets? So let's see how collaboration has practically changed. And let me start with you, Knut. What do you see in practice? How collaboration changes with moving towards beyond budgeting?
Well, I think when I talk about clients anyway, when they do allocation of resources at a higher level, for example, and that you don't have to lock in or work with sandbagging and stuff like that, then you tend to trust others a little bit more. And also, if you work with a higher vision, of course, like the North Star or something like that, then you start to collaborate a lot more. And costs, most of the times costs are good, but you don't want the bad cost in an organization. So that's what you have to be aware of, that not just try to be anorectic or something like that in your organization with cost savings. try to use them wisely, and you will grow.
Right. Right. Thank you for that. Manuel, can you tell us what has changed in your collaboration after you started using rolling forecasts?
When I look back to the different organizations that I participated, and also today at Nilfisk, I think that the technology has really played an important role in facilitating the discussion. So then people do not really waste time discussing the numbers or the quality of the numbers, but they start discussing how to improve things or how to reach the greater good, so to say. So, but we're still doing budgets, but we do forecast as well. And I think technology is also playing a big role in terms of facilitating the weekly ones, because people just report in a certain schedule, and then all the numbers are aligned as expected in terms of that we can actually start analyzing centrally. So that is working pretty well.
Good. Amer, what about you? How collaboration has practically changed in Roche after moving to no budget?
Yeah, definitely. It really helped us break down the silos between different departments and different functions, that's for sure. One of the major catalysts was the transparency, what every team is trying to achieve. And it actually helped catalyze the discussion wherever we might see that, yes, there is a duplication of efforts. I mean, how do we actually do that? Can we actually achieve the same outcome? Maybe through a different activity, maybe there is a better way to do to achieve the same result. It definitely helped us, and technology plays a significant role in bringing the transparency and in keeping it up to date. Whatever we plan or whatever we foresee, that what is actually about to happen as well. So it definitely played a significant role in bringing down the silos, because the silos, they definitely are a big source of resource wastage, to be honest. I mean, so this is what we see there. It really catalyzed the collaboration here.
Great. And back to you, Michael. How do you see collaboration practically changing with transition to beyond budgeting?
I think there's more collaboration, and I think the use of the FP&A software, that's what we saw, becomes more frequent. You have more forecasts where the system is used, often connected to less detail that is used, and we saw a sharp increase in smarter data entry functions. So use, for example, allocations, right? If you need to enter 100 values in the system, well, it doesn't always mean that you need to physically enter 100 numbers. There's ways how software can help you to basically make the data entry as intuitive and quick as possible. So making it quicker that you can more easily do more quick updates of your forecasts.
Right. Thank you for all your answers and all your angles. And actually brings us to the end part of this session, to the key takeaways. We have answered 3 key questions today about beyond budgeting: why we need this transition, how to transition, and what can help us in doing that. So, what I would ask you to do now is actually say 30 seconds key takeaways for you. And let me start with you, Manuel. What's a key takeaway for you from the whole session?
I think it's the why. We need to know what is the greater good, and how to have a shape that allows you to go forward. I think that's the most important thing. And secondly, the what, like what actually to implement, how to facilitate things in order to reach where you want.
Good. Amer, what's a key takeaway for you? Out of everything been said tonight, what's the key idea for you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the key takeaway for me is definitely having a clear linkage between your purpose and what you're trying to achieve. And then what Manuel says as well, I mean, the why. So the more clarity you have on the why, the better it is, or the more clarity you get in and how to get there as well. That's for sure. Yeah.
Right. Michael, what do you think? What was a key idea for you?
That we live in challenging times with a higher frequency. I think we learned that from the old perspectives of traditional budgeting, we need to move to a more modern approach with more complexity, more frequent updates. And I think to cope with those challenges, we need to make use of software. So that would be my learning. Make use of what's available there to really be ready for today's challenges.
Right. And back to you, Knut. What do you think? What's key takeaway for you?
Well, I think you have to make your management model, if you like, fit for purpose, and that is with your business or operating model, and then also decouple the different processes and rename maybe some parts of the budget process to what it really is and the purpose of that, and then also one set of reports or one set of numbers, that's key, of course. If you don't have one set of numbers, then it's really difficult to do these analytics. So that's also very important.
Thank you all for your key takeaways. We have covered various different angles of the topic, of the problem, and let's now give space to our Q&A session. We have received many questions, but let's at least try to answer some of them tonight. And I will start with you, Amer. I have a question that was addressed directly to you. Actually, I have many of those, but let's pick this one for now. How frequent do you rewrite your budget in Roche at any given financial year? So how frequently you reforecast? And it should be consuming major time of the finance team.
Yes, exactly. As I mentioned earlier, we do not have the budget per se. What we have is an estimate. We have a certain baseline, and once we have that baseline, we actually go with the event-driven planning. Just to give you an example, if we believe that a certain data readout for a product in a disease area, it is going to be very positive for us, and then there is an uptake for a certain product which would require certain resources in order to go behind that one as well. So what we do is we look at that event, and as soon as that event materializes, we actually update our forecast. So in the forecast, that doesn't really become our target. This is something which we believe that this is what will happen. In terms of the time when we actually took away the whole process, heavy process of bottom-up building extremely detailed plans, we replaced it with what we now call it in finance an enterprise business partners. So instead of coming in a lot later on as a recipient of the information what actually team gives us, we actually sit down with the teams and try to understand the business drivers right at the beginning. So once we understand more and more of these business drivers, it actually takes less and less time to really understand and interpret it into and quantify it in the financials, how we're actually doing it. So definitely it wasn't easy in the beginning. I mean, in finance, we were not really used to it. We were pretty much like about, tell me how much you need, how much days, you know, a little bit of a challenge that actually happens. But the more we actually transition as the business partners, the more we actually understood the business, easier it become to really quantify impact of any event. And then this is how we actually move forward with that one.
Amazing, thank you. Yeah, I hope so as well, because it's actually you explain how you achieve efficiency while making so many updates. Let me address next question to you, Michael. Question related to technology and cooperation. What do you think should be budget forecasting input process distributed to individual departments, or it should be retained by finance team? What do you think? Individual departments should input data or finance team?
That's a very easy question. Definitely the business. The FP&A department should just be the facilitator, the orchestrator of the process, but the insights should come from the business. They should all be users. there you might want to discuss, well, should it be at what granularity that you plan, etc. But clear answer, definitely from the business. FP&A should be the challenger, the facilitator. They should run the systems, and they should ask difficult questions and support the business. But the insights definitely need to come from the business and not centrally.
Nice, nice. And systems certainly should support this entry from multiple users. Okay, question for you, Knud. As an expert in methodology and beyond budgeting, the question to you is, what do you suggest? Should we use budgets in parallel with rolling forecasts, or we should aim to get rid of budgets completely? What's your suggestion?
Well, there's sometimes a misunderstanding about budgets, even though Amos said no budgets. I think all of organizations do allocate resources, and the resource allocation process is actually you might say the budget. So you will allocate, so you will in that way, perspective have some kind of documentation or maybe approval even. But you shouldn't try to keep the old traditional way of doing variance analysis, for example. I think you should get rid of lots of things that doesn't add value, and you should definitely not try to run parallel processes. If you have a budget process and say, let's try beyond budgeting or something like that, whatever you call it, then you have to let go of the old before you start with the new, and do it with prototyping. You will not forget how to do budget within a month or a year even. So if you fail, the risk is pretty low actually. And I mean, you just can go back to the old way of doing stuff. But
great. Great. Yeah. Thank you for your answer. It's actually quite safe way to try things, and if it doesn't work, come back. And question to you, Manuel. I see that many people were actually excited by the way weekly rolling forecast. So it seems quite challenging, but I understand that you use event-driven logic as well. So the question is whether you update all the P&L lines weekly, or you somehow select which ones to update weekly or which ones to update once a year. So
no,
to
it's only a selection.
Granularity. Mm-hmm.
Yes, no, it's only a selection. Is as Michael said earlier, like to choose which ones are the ones that are driving the most performance issues in the business model in the end. So and also you can choose like a different kind of weekly reporting that the organization can feed, and it is also again regarding the context of things. So for example, in COVID times, maybe you were more into having insight into your accounts receivables. Then you could potentially easily set up some sort of weekly reporting like that. But in terms of only P&L, then we'll focus in the 3-4 lines that can explain the most likely landing in a given period of time.
Great. Certainly, efficiency lines behind updating only what matters. Thank you for this question. And the last question will be addressed to all of you. And just I would like just to name just one word basically as an answer, because the question is, which skill as a FP&A professional I need to develop to transition to beyond budgeting? So which do you think is the most important FP&A skill to succeed in it? And let me start with you, Amer. What do you think? What is the most important skill?
Understanding the business drivers.
Good. Nice answer. Michael, what do you think? What's the most important skill?
3 words: critical logical thinking.
Wow, indeed, that's crucial skill for everyone these days. Knut, what is your thinking? What is the most critical skill to succeed in beyond budgeting?
Curiosity and learning, I think.
Great. And Manuel, what do you think? What is the most important skill?
I think it's a commitment to trust, to foster an environment of of trust and collaboration with your colleagues.
Wow, really like those answers. I think we are getting already philosophical here, because these skills you have named are valid not only for beyond budgeting, for actually for success and happiness in life. And on this optimistic note, I would like to invite all our participants of today's webinar to a couple of upcoming events. I'm myself looking forward to them. The first one is webinar on digital FP&A in practice, really practical case study here, and top 5 FP&A challenges and how to address them. So I will be very happy to see you there. And what's left for me is actually to thank our sponsor, Unit4, for making this event possible. Unit4, thank you for allowing this to happen. Dear participants, if you still don't know how to connect to us, how to connect to FP&A Trends Global Community, there are multiple ways you can do so. So please choose the one that fits you best. And after we finish this webinar, there will be a short survey on your screen. Please take 20 or 30 seconds to take part in it, as your feedback is very important for us. Thank you so much for all of you for being here. Thank you to my panelists for sharing their knowledge, for answering our questions, for being here with us tonight. Have a good evening. Enjoy the rest of your week. See you soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.